All right, good morning. Thank you for being here with us today for the media availability with Chief Jennings. We're here this morning to address the situation that transpired 2 days ago near the intersection of South Tryon Street and West Arrowwood Road in the Steel Creek Division. We certainly received many questions about the incident, so we wanted to have an opportunity to answer those today. Yesterday, a video was widely circulated on various media platforms showing Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officers arresting two subjects. Let me take a moment just to provide some factual information before Chief Jennings comes. On the afternoon of Monday, November 13th, two officers patrolling the area of South Tryon Street and West Arrowwood Road observed two people identified as Anthony Lee and Christina Pierre smoking marijuana at a city-owned bus stop. The officers stopped, engaged the two people, and stated that the two people were under arrest. Both individuals resisted arrest, and a struggle ensued with the officers. During the struggle, the female individual struck an officer multiple times. When the struggle with both subjects started, one of the officers had called for backup. He called for help as the two were resisting arrest. After the officers took Mr. Lee into custody, a loaded 9mm handgun was located in a bag that was in his possession. When backup officers arrived, they assisted on the scene. Ms. Pierre was continuing to resist arrest. Officers had her on the ground and were working to free her arms to place her into custody. After several repeated verbal commands, one of the backup officers struck Ms. Pierre several times with knee strikes and with closed fists to the common peroneal nerve in the leg in an effort to gain compliance. This action is consistent with our training and is done in order to gain compliance and to prevent further assault by a non-compliant subject. Officers were ultimately able to gain compliance from Ms. Pierre and take her into custody. Chief of Police Johnny Jennings is here with us this morning to share his reaction to the situation and to answer your questions, and he's going to come at this time. Chief.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I just want to start out by saying I've had the opportunity to watch the video, the one that went viral, as well as the opportunity to see the body-worn camera footage that you all have not been privy to see as well. I'll just say to everyone and to our community, I get it. I understand the outrage. I understand the emotions that come when you look at a video that involves an officer who is punching a female who we're trying to make the arrest and subdue. I understand that. To our officers who put on this uniform and do the work every single day to keep our community safe, I'll tell you, I am still and always will be proud to be a Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officer for the last 32 years. I think we have a lot of great men and women who do great things every single day in our community to keep our community safe. But as we look at this video, we also have to understand what impact this has on the community. And what message does that send to the community when we take action against our response to a resistance of someone who we're trying to make an arrest? If I look at this entire thing, are there things that we can do better? Absolutely. Are there things that I wish would have never happened? Certainly. Are there things that I think we can take from this and become better as an agency? We're committed to that, and we're going to do that. We know that there are things that we can look at policy-wise, training-wise. We know that there are things that our officers are held under such high standards, but we don't want an incident such as this in the public eye to define who we are as an agency. I've been in those exact situations. I've been in struggles with men, women, white, black, all of that in my 32 years of policing. And I can tell you that I've never been involved in using force that has looked pretty and has looked good to the public. So these are difficult situations, and all I ask is we continue to let this investigation internally play out. I have a really fine line to make sure that we are addressing this as the public and as our officers see that it needs to be addressed. The way that I do that is to look at the facts, the policy, and make that determination from that point. So it's going to be a long road from this point on, a lot of sleepless nights. But I assure you that when everything is said and done, we will be looking at the facts of everything that happened out there on that day, and we'll determine what steps need to be taken immediately. So I don't want to take up all the time talking. I know there's several questions that I'll be glad to answer. Yes.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
you've acknowledged the knee strikes that the officer and I we've seen on the video.
Yes.
But Ms. Pierre also has had swelling to her face and injuries to her face. What hasn't been explained by CMPD and what isn't in the video is how her face got injured in that incident.
Yes, absolutely. So the face injuries, I did receive those yesterday. And I asked my staff to go back and let's look at all the videos that we can try to determine where those injuries might have come from. There's a couple of different thoughts out there from watching the body-worn camera. There's nothing that's very clear and visible that whether an officer struck her, particularly there's nothing that shows that she was struck while she was on the ground in the head or face area. There was a struggle with a single officer that occurred before his backup did arrive. We think that if those abrasion or bruising on her face occurred, it would have occurred during that struggle at some point. Unfortunately, that officer's body-worn camera was knocked off during the struggle, and you can just barely see it in the corner of that struggle as it continued above the body-worn camera. So that's going to be part of the investigation, hopefully through officer statements, but it is consistent with the side of her face, whether that be an abrasion or a strike to the side of her head.
What is stopping you from releasing the body camera video right now?
The North Carolina state law is what's stopping me. I think that the public does deserve a right to see this video. I'm confident that the public will see this video, but we've already filed a petition to the courts to release it. That could take a couple of months, you know, and it's not a process that I truly care for, but it is the state law process, and we will abide by that. But we've already taken steps to move forward.
From the body camera video that you have seen, is there a reason that you would be disciplining any of your officers?
That's way too early to tell right now. That's going to have to be through an full internal investigation. What I can tell you is that the body-worn camera footage, particularly when they're on the ground, tells more of the story than what the footage that you see from a distance. Because my concern immediately was where are these strikes being placed, and we also are able to help corroborate and determine the amount of strikes, all of that, and where the positioning of all the officers are. Because when you look at the video from a distance, yeah, you see several officers on surrounding the female, on top of the female, what it appears to be on top of the female. But when you look at the body-worn camera footage, you basically see up close what each officer's responsibility is.
You've seen it, we haven't. So
Yes.
Can you tell us what preceded the alleged punch to the officer? Were there words exchanged? Did the officer grab at Miss Pierre first? I mean, how did that go down?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm not permitted to describe what's in the video. I can tell you based on what the officers, what I've been told initially, right? So the officer were in the area, they smelled the odor of marijuana. When they were walking around the area, they noticed at the bus stop, Miss Pierre and the gentleman sitting at the bus stop smoking what appeared to be a blunt marijuana cigarette. When they went and approached them, they simply asked if they were smoking marijuana. And there was some dispute as to whether they were smoking marijuana. The officer smelled marijuana, saw the marijuana cigarette. At that point, they did initiate an arrest of the gentleman. Miss Pierre did interact with that. causing the second officer to try and keep her from interfering. At that point, the officer was initiating arrest on Miss Pierre, and that's when the struggle ensued.
As far as the training, when it gets, the video that we have all seen gets to the ground, and I believe in one of the statements y'all provided, you talked about the training of hitting those major muscles.
Yes.
Can you describe to the public what your officers are trained to do, or why they're trained to hit those places, and also, what's the threshold? At what point is enough?
Great question. Great question. So the peroneal nerve is the nerve that goes down the side of the leg. It's a major nerve. It is a tactic trained by the state, and we train it within our police academy as well. It is a compliance blow. A strike to the peroneal nerve is if someone has their hands underneath them and we're trying to activate an arrest. That strike to the peroneal nerve, the hope is that it will cause that distraction or pain compliance that will get them to put their hands behind their back. I say that also with the fact that that is not the only technique, all right? So we have certain techniques that we can use, but if you're trying to get someone's hands out from underneath their body, as a matter of fact, I was in training just before this happened, on training on how to get someone's arms out from underneath their body when you're trying to activate an arrest. So we have different ways to try, and this is, but it is part of the training as far as to get pain compliance on that nerve right down the side of the leg. So that's what, when you look at the body-worn camera, you'll see exactly where those blows are delivered.
And to my question in there, what's the threshold? When is an officer trained to stop hitting?
So the threshold, that's a difficult point to answer. We are doing what is necessary to activate the arrest. From what I saw, that once she was in custody in handcuffs, there were no more blows delivered. Now, that's one of the things that we certainly should be looking at is, you know, where do we realize that this isn't working? We did that with the taser, if you remember, that if at some point it's not working, you have to move to something else. So we've already had those discussions. Yeah, I think it was 7 knee strikes, 10 fists, and we have to really take a close look at when is enough enough?
Was that excessive to you?
Well,
As was
again,
some of the public?
that's what the investigation is going to have to determine. I can tell you that in the public's opinion, yeah, absolutely, the public is going to say that was excessive, and I understand that. I get it. You know, but we also at the same time see how are we training? When do we say, hey, we have to move to something else, just similar to what we did with the taser?
Chief, in terms of the heightened sense, do you think there's more of a heightened sense of everything, considering everything that's been happening since 2018? The fact that it was a white officer and a black person as opposed to black on black, white on white, but the fact that it was white on black, do you think there's a heightened sense of concern about that?
I think there is, yes, sir. They, you know, we have to be sensitive to that, and whether you like it or not, it's the reality of today's world. When you obviously, I never want to see any of my officers have to get to a point to where they feel they have to deliver strikes or use force against anyone. I never want any of my officers to be subjected to being assaulted. But when you do add the race factor into all this, it does heighten it, because I think that we've seen historically, not just in Charlotte, but across the country, the mistreatment of black and brown people throughout the country by police. And that's what people look at and causes concern. When you look at some of the incidents that we've dealt with in the past across the country that have sparked the emotions of our general public, when people see something like this, their first reaction is this another one? Is this another incident? And I don't want our community to feel like that's what happens here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. And we've made some great strides over the last 3 or so years since 2020. We've progressed. We've changed a lot of policy. Again, I will always say that we're a learning agency. We're going to continue to work to make sure that we get to where we need to be on how we police our community. It's never, ever going to be finished. And I've said before that if you expect us never to have an incident that is questionable within any agency within policing, then that's not reality. As long as there are human beings doing this job, there are going to be things that are going to be questioned and mistakes that are made and things that we're going to have to step back and drop back and punt and take another look at training-wise. So, yes, ma'am.
Did Christina have to get any treatment or care for any of her injuries or anything like that? And then are there any officers on administrative leave during this investigation?
Yeah, so I can tell you that she did refuse medic. We did offer that to her during the interview process. The officer involved that delivered the strikes, we're going to release his information to you after this is over, but the officer involved has been reassigned. So that officer is not in a patrol division at this point.
What is the department doing to build trust again? When people see this, it's questionable.
Yeah, certainly. And I think the trust factor deals with the communication that you have to have immediately. Those relationships should already be built. And those relationships that have been built over the years, that you have to get on the call, you have to meet with people, you have to begin having these conversations, as tough as they might be. I can't sit up here and tell anyone that, hey, we're good, let's move on, nothing to see here, because there is. And the community leaders that are out there, that they also help us to understand what is the impact that we're truly having. Because as we sit down as an organization and determine what do we need to do, where do we need to go from here, we can't make that decision by ourselves. We need that community input to say, and we need to be able to come together, and we agree to disagree sometimes, but for the most part, again, when I said we're going to have community collaboration, that was not just me providing lip service to the public. I think we've proven that over the years, and we'll continue to prove that. This is another step that needs to be taken.
Chief,
Thank you.
you guys have made policy changes in years past. You told us just a minute ago that there are things that you will be looking at regarding policy. Specifically, you've seen more video than any of us. What things are you looking at is in regards to policy change?
Well, one of the things that we even talked about this morning was, what is our response to marijuana use? I don't think anyone in the community wants to have where we're openly smoking, letting people smoke marijuana, and on top of that, you're looking at an individual who was about to get on a city bus with a gun in his bag. So we always talk about cat safety and things like that. And we have an area within a 1 mile radius that has seen 194 violent crimes in the last 3 years. So we need our officers to be proactive in those situations, but at some point we have to always look at what is, when we get out, what is our purpose, right? What is our goal here? Is it to simply make an arrest for marijuana, which we rarely do, or is it we feel like this interaction is going to make that community safer? So our response to marijuana would be one thing. Also, just as I believe it was you that said it, when is enough on the strikes? Do we need to deliver body strikes when you have 4 officers subduing an individual? Do we look at that as active aggression regardless of what happened prior to that? At that point, when is that person passively aggressive and not actively aggressive? So all of those things have to be reviewed, and along with every single policy that has anything to do with that type of action. So those are just a couple things off the top of my head. I can kind of predict that as we go down the road, we're going to find more things that we want to look at as well.
Chief, I want to turn back to the body cam issues and release. You just forecast it could take several months for this video to come out.
Yes.
In Wake County, within the last year or so, they went to court and got a court order pursuant to the law overnight. What is stopping that from happening in Charlotte-Mecklenburg County?
I wish I knew. I don't know if that's truly a question for me. I don't know if it's a matter of the volume that we have or the resources that we have. But yeah, I certainly have heard other counties that have been able to turn around body-worn cameras, camera footage very quickly. I wish that were the case here, particularly in an incident like this, because I feel like the public deserves to see it, good or bad. I'm not going to sit here and say that, hey, once you see the body-worn camera, everybody's going to be happy and we're going to go our merry way. This is not something that is pretty to watch or easy to watch.
Is it frustrating to you that you have video that was shot on a camera, that was bought with the promise of transparency to the community, but there's a state law passed by lawmakers in Raleigh who are blocking you from using your judgment to release it to the public?
Yeah, Nick, it is frustrating to me because when, as much as I can tell the public that it's not my decision to release, I can petition for it, but I ultimately don't make that decision. The public sees that as a transparency issue and they see it towards CMPD. And I've seen many stories out just recently that we're going to see if CMPD will release the video, or CMPD has not yet released the video. It's not CMPD releasing the video. It's the courts saying that we can release it. So we're going to do everything we can, and hopefully we can expedite this. But I truly, there are certain cases that probably need to hold for a little bit for investigative purposes. But in a situation like this, I think all we're going to do is open this back up, open wounds back up in a couple of months when it is released.
Last question on this point. Sorry to take so much of this time, but I think it's important. This law was passed with the backing of law enforcement, including taking your ability away to release it. As the police chief of one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the state, would you call for the law to be changed to give you the leeway to release that video?
I think there still needs to be a process. I think the process should not have to take 2 months or 3 months or a year. But I do think there should be a process with checks and balances within that, because when you start talking about the video, everyone has a say who's in that video, whether they want to object to the release or not. The district attorney has to weigh in whether that should be released or not. If it's a State Bureau of Investigation case, they should weigh in on whether it hinders their investigation, and then the time that it takes. But I certainly think that there should be some way to expedite when we need to in the matter of public interest. And this might be one of them that we can say, this does no harm to go ahead and release it now. Yeah, I do think we should speed that up.
I know that you passed a policy that if there's an officer involved shooting, the SBI will handle that a lot of times, or handle that.
Yes.
Will they be part of this at all, or this will strictly all just be with you guys, CMPD?
This will be strictly with CMPD. I do think that there will likely be some reviews of this case just because of the attention that it has gotten. But we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can from a CMPD end to make sure that we're looking at all angles of this. And at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, there'll be no question that we have done our due diligence in this investigation.
When you say the officer's been reassigned, can you say what he's been reassigned to?
He's been reassigned to an investigative division, but that's about what I can tell you right now. So.
Chief, I think this gets back to your previous point before you started taking questionings, that you understand the community's outrage on this. Yesterday, I believe it was Ms. Mack who told us that you had 5 male officers on a 125-pound woman.
Yes.
Do you agree that the optics are bad here and that should not have happened?
Yeah, the optics are bad. I've said that from the beginning. She was her actual size is 5'8", 180, and not trying to say that it matters, but I'm just because when I saw the video, I said she's 130 pounds, you know. But when you look, that's public record on the arrest data. So yeah, that's fine. What was your question again now?
Do you, when you see that,
Yes.
in the grand scheme of things, you say that you understand the outrage,
Yes.
you get it, but should that have happened, what we witnessed there?
No, it shouldn't have happened, but whose responsibility is the question, right? That should have never happened. You know, should we have initiated an arrest for marijuana use, even though we can. Should she have basically interfered with the arrest of the gentleman and struck our officers, none of that should have happened. And we look at what could have been the outcome had one or the other side done something differently. And we hold that responsibility on our end to say, what do we need to look at that would have changed that outcome? Because over the last several years, I haven't stood before you in a very long time, thank goodness, to talk about something of this magnitude. So I do think that we have made strides, that we have done some really good things, and that we have some positive things that our officers are doing every single day in the community. This takes us back. And that's why I tell, even internally within all of our people, that everything you do out in the community is bigger than you. You're not only affecting the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, you're affecting the entire profession across the country. And we have to think about that every single day. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you have to do something.
When you look at the body camera video, do you think that your officers de-escalated the situation as well as they could have based on their training?
Yeah, and again, I don't want to get too much into the investigation. I can tell you a couple of things that hindsight, you can look back and say there were ways to de-escalate that. But also you have to understand that de-escalation also means that you have a cooperating party that will allow you to de-escalate. There was a point in that situation where I don't think de-escalation officers were given that opportunity to de-escalate, but de-escalation could have been anywhere from the start to where we don't even address it in the first place. Now the issue with that, I don't think anyone, like I said, anyone in our community wants to live in a society as long as marijuana is legal, that you're walking down the street and you have people smoking marijuana publicly, especially as you're getting ready to get on a CATS bus, and particularly not carrying a concealed weapon on a city bus as well. So de-escalation is one of those things that we talk about all the time. Again, part of the training I told you I was in yesterday was de-escalation training. And how do you talk your way through avoiding altercations like this? And so as you look back, of course, I can sit in my office in my chair and I can look at the video and I can say, oh, they should have done this, this, and this, but I wasn't out there on the scene either. So.
Other than talking, how are police trained to de-escalate situations?
Well, de-escalation can be just about anything. De-escalation could be just a show, right? We're trained that from the beginning, that our uniform alone and our presence alone could be a de-escalation tactic. Our demeanor, our tone of the voice, not just what we're saying, but how we're saying it. The actions that we take. Do we need to actually put hands on someone? Because as you know, if you grab someone by the arm or you grab someone by the shoulder, their immediate response is defensive. And so we have to learn all of that as far as when you talk about de-escalation. What are my actions going to do to make someone rise to the level of being defensive and combative? So all of that comes into play.
And do you believe her actions to ward off this officer were defensive?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yes. You talking about her actions to the officer?
Yes.
Yes, they were.
It was again also about de-escalation, but when we're talking about like multiple officers on one person and so forth, is there anything in policy that addresses that? Like, in the talk of de-escalation, maybe like, two backing off, or, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that, no, there's not, as far as like how many people. We do have training of rules of engagement that deal with one officer takedowns, two officer takedowns, even four officers. Where do those four officers are supposed to be positioned? Say you have two on each side on the front, two on each side on the back, and your goal is the two up front are to, their goal is to handcuff the individual. The two in the back are to control the legs. If you can control the legs and the hips, then you have less likely of a chance for that individual injuring themselves and also that individual injuring the officers. And so when you, I think there were 5 officers in this matter, the one that was delivering the strikes, and then but outside of that, you had the 2 up front, 2 in the back. And that's another thing that I think as we go through that we need to look at and say, how many, we talk about strikes, how much is enough, and same with officers, how much is enough. But I can tell you that they have to be able to activate the arrest safely, and if that means, if we look at this and that means it takes 1 officer, 2 officers, 5 officers, as long as they can activate that arrest safely, that's the goal.
I have a quick clarifying question. It goes back to the beginning of what preceded all of this. You had, I believe, told another reporter that nothing that you saw leads you to believe that that first officer struck Miss Pierre in the face with a fist, of how she got the wounds. I ask that because we have witnesses who are telling us otherwise, that they saw the officer punch her in the face.
Did I say that?
You said that there was nothing that you could definitively say.
Okay. From the camera.
From
Yes.
the camera,
Yes.
that your officer punched her in the face.
Certainly, yeah. I can't definitively say. Now, certainly, you can. I'm not going to refute that and say no, the officer did not punch her. I don't know. But what I can tell you is that I did see the bruises on the side of her face. It is consistent with either a punch or an abrasion. That whether she was held down on the ground with her face on the ground, but if through the interview process, if we find other video footage that we are currently looking for, I certainly am not going to say he definitively hit her in the face, but what I can tell you is what I saw is that his reaction was after he was punched at least 2 times in the face. So the officer was. The officer was punched by Miss Pierre in the face. Yeah.
My last question is, I want to take you back to 2020 when you marched the streets with local leaders wanting more transparency and accountability in police departments. What do you want to say to the community about, to put some confidence in how you will handle this situation?
Well, I think the message is, let's not lose sight of the big picture. Let's not lose sight of how far we've come, the relationships that we've built, the progress that we've made, the policies that we've changed. All of that has to come into play. And to know that if you look back at what we did in 2020, trust that we can continue to do that, to make sure that as we deal with situations like this, we're always going to be coming to the table and saying, how can we avoid this? We do that every single day internally. And as I talk about community collaboration, I think that we need to have that input, and we need to come to some sort of agreement to say, this is what needs to happen, and this is how we do it in policy. And then we also have to, at that point, train. But at the same time, you can have all the policy and training and messaging and all of that you want. That doesn't mean that at some point somebody is going to do something, or there's going to be some action taken that we don't need to take another look and drop back and reevaluate again. So.
What should the public do when they're approached by officers for things like this not to happen?
Wow. So when approached by an officer, to make sure this doesn't happen, you've heard this several times, and people say, hey, just as if the officer asks you to stand up, put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest, then refute that later, right? I mean, if you're going to resist, if you're going to fight an officer, it's not going to end well for the most part for the person doing that. However, it's easy for me to sit up here and say that, but at the same time, I think as officers, we have to realize where some of this frustration comes. And when we're dealing with individuals, that just because they might be resistant to what you're doing as a police officer does not make them an evil or bad person. Officers, and we try to make sure, particularly with our rookie officers, to see, what's the history that we're dealing with here? You're only talking a few generations back to where someone's grandmother or great grandmother were probably, or great grandfather, probably had stories about mistreatment in dealing with law enforcement. And as those stories continue on through generations, then that's one of the things our officers need to understand as well, because we have to have empathy towards the people that we're dealing with, black, white, it doesn't matter, Hispanic, and we have to understand that you have the ability to take someone's freedom away, and that's certainly a big responsibility. That has great responsibility. That has great magnitude behind it, and we have to be aware of that. So.
All right.
Just for clarification, do you believe that Christina's actions were offensive or defensive?
Do I believe the officer's actions?
Christina's.
Oh, well, her actions offensive or defensive? The short answer to that is both. She didn't want to be arrested. She didn't want her friend to be arrested. She didn't want the property to be taken from, because she, comments about the property that was there. And so as she was offensively resisting at that point and trying to interfere, but she was being defensive in not to be arrested by the officer. So yeah, it's both if you want to dissect it down to that. So.
Okay, and last question for me, will the body cam footage that you will be releasing be from all the officers on the scene or just from the officer that had the compromised
The petition, my understanding, the petition will be all video that we have in ownership. That would be whether it's body worn, whether it's CDOT cameras, anything that's out there, any private video that we might have from businesses, that can be released without me having to get a court order. But anything that's in our ownership will be released. All right. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Yes.
I thank you everyone for your time this morning.
Video that we might have from businesses, that can be released without me having to get a court order. But anything that's in